When Edward returned to the sheds, Rebecca and Patrick were the only ones awake. The West Country and Class 40 didn't need to say anything. They knew what had happened.
You didn't want to tell her, didn't you?
Rebecca asked quietly. More than Thomas didn't, replied Edward sadly. But what choice did we have? She had every right to know what became of her in the end. I'm just so sorry that her original life ended because of Hot Rod's unintentional actions. Overlord will pay for what he made Hot Rod do to her, scowled Patrick. Mark my words.
I admire your enthusiasm, Patrick,
said Rebecca.
But here's the thing. None of those proper engines would stand a chance against Overlord. I don't even think the IOL engines would with their high tractive efforts. One time she could have fought Overlord was to avenge the Mistress of Flame when she used the Enigma to merge with the other combiners. But when Tripticon attacked her, she had to use her new powers on him instead.
Edward remained silent, feeling very worried for his large 6-in-1 friend, Victorion, the female combiner. Secretly, he felt very guilty. It wasn't just Edward feeling bogged down. All the engines, big and small, were worried for Victorion. She just found out what became of her original body, and was still struggling to process what Edward told her. The engines rarely saw her outside whenever they brought Energon trucks in and out of the Combiner lab. Sometimes, you could even hear faint crying. Even if they wanted to check on her, none of them could reach the female combiner, as a line that led to where the smelting shed stood had since been ripped up, due to the impossibility for them to climb such a steep slope. All they could do was whistle. Some engines even had their crews send get-well cards to Victorion, which cheered her up a bit. But she and her separate selves couldn't seem to get out of the depressed headspace they were in. One day, Molly sadly pulled into Vickerstown with some empty Energon trucks.
I feel so sorry for Victorion,
she told Bear.
I wish she could return to service as happy as memories would have made her. Makes me wonder how the Totter's other Cybertronian friends were also affected by their deaths.
Like she told Sandy, said Bear, us and the other engines have absolutely nothing to do with Hot Rod's unintentional actions. I'm sure Overlord will get what he deserves in the end, he finished, rolling away.
He'd better,
agreed Molly, who usually wasn't the type to hold a grudge. As the subsequent Power of the Primes episodes were released, the engines were relieved when Overlord was taken out with the Requiem blaster. However, the way Megatron mourned Victorion's old self left much to be desired. Trust the former Decepticon leader to mourn her old self properly, grunted James. Missing her like rust between his treads! Disgusting!
Megatron seems to have changed, James,
said Carly.
He told Victorion's old self he didn't want to start up his original empire again at the end of Titan's return.
But Victorion didn't want to go with him in the first place, James retorted. If I were in her heels, I'd rip him to shreds like she said, and the Dinobots wouldn't have attacked at all! And he fumed off with his coal train. James was still in a foul mood as he went to turn around at the lab. He looked up at the female combiner's house. It stood tall and proud against the other buildings. Even James couldn't help feeling small compared to its intimidating presence. Don't bother disturbing her, James, sighed the driver. She still needs time to come round. James respectfully puffed away. He whistled as he passed under the bridge. Victorion heard this through an open window, but said nothing in response. James was soon back at Victorstown, waiting to leave with a passenger train. He then heard a familiar whistle. Thomas was approaching the station with a load of energon. Thomas? What are you doing all the way out here? Asked James. Will Grady and Corey were in a rush with their slow goods, replied Thomas. As a result, the silly sods left this lot of energon behind, so the Fat Controller asked me to take it to the lab. James didn't say anything at first. He knew how Thomas felt when he witnessed Victorion's murder. At least he told someone before letting it get to you, he said before puffing away. Thomas now felt most uneasy. How would Victorion react if she saw him? We'll be as quick as we can, Thomas, said his driver. Thomas shunted his trucks into a siding and was just about to leave when...
What brings you here, Thomas?
Thomas jumped when he saw Victorion walking towards him. He looked up at the female combiner. I'm sorry, Victorion, he began.
Whatever for?
For not telling you the truth, replied Thomas sadly. I couldn't muster up the courage to do so.
I understand, Thomas. I really do,
said Victorion. That's why I was wondering about Edward, said Thomas. As he was the one who brought you here, I knew he was the only engine you could trust over someone like me.
Don't be silly, Thomas. How could I not trust everyone's favorite little blue tank engine? It would be unthinkable. How's Edward doing, by the way? I thought I heard a sniff from him when I left the other night.
He really didn't want to tell you, replied Thomas. But who else would have told you? Certainly not the Fat Controller.
He too understands my current state, Thomas, said
Victorion.
He's actually referred me to a professional counselor in Victortown as a means of trying to help me move on. Well, humans obviously don't really understand my case. At least it's something.
Thomas agreed. Victorion watched the E2 puff sadly away.
If only the others knew I was here now,
she thought.
Do they still remember me?
The next day, Scarlowy and Adeline were at the wharf when they saw Edward backing towards some energon trucks. Hello, Edward, called Scarlowy. What brings you to our turf, then? Fat Controller wants me to bring this energon to the lab, replied Edward. The narrow-gauge engines noticed the depressed look on the K2's face.
How are the rest renegades doing, Edward?
I'm not so sure, replied Edward. I haven't seen Victorion since telling her the truth. She probably doesn't see herself the same way anymore. I would if I were in her heels, agreed Scarlowy. I also would have told her, but there's no lines connecting mine and Adeline's neck of the woods to hers. Even so, Edward, I'm sure she's grateful for what you did to bring her here. Telling Victorion about what became of her old self reminded me of a horrible dream I had not long after Henry returned from crew, continued Edward. I saw his old shape in a scrapyard, as if he was a completely separate entity from the green chap we all know and love today. Well, we do know that his small box door was reused, said Scarlowy, so he's still the same engine, but like Victorion, just in a completely different body.
Oh, by the way, Edward,
said Adeline.
my driver wrote her a gift card on my behalf. Could you deliver it for me, please?
Of course, Adeline, replied Edward. Save for his puffing, Edward was mostly silent throughout the journey. He knew how affected Victorion would be once he told her the truth, but all the same, she had every right to know what became of her in the end. Edward soon arrived at the lab and shunted his trucks into a siding.
Edward?
Edward looked up and was surprised to see Victorion walking towards him.
How are you holding up?
I was going to ask you the same thing, Torchbearers, replied Edward.
You know something, Edward?
Said Victorion.
For all the time I've spent on your planet, I never understood why you brought me here. But after a chat with Sandy the other night, the final piece fell into place. The real answer to solving my mystery. What I'm trying to say is...
Victorion paused.
You've helped me restart my life, Edward. As well as my spark. You've given me a chance no one else would have given. Not even Hasbro themselves. Sure, fan work is a thing, but it's not the same compared to what happens to an actual being. Human or machines like us. Out of all the engines, you saw potential in me. And there's another thing. You and the other engines have actually given me a reason to be happy.
Edward was taken aback.
All my time on Cybertron, I've had only rare moments where I'm pleased with myself due to the constant risk of a Decepticon attack. Only Moonracer could get me into such a headspace. Even when I first arrived, I still didn't fully understand the emotion. But now I do. As above all else, you've brought me to a place where I actually feel safe. I can enjoy civilian life more than I ever wanted. And like Sandy told me, I'm still adjusting to it. And now, I'm really truly starting to accept it.
You still miss your Cybertronian friends, do you? Asked Edward.
More than anything.
Sighed Victorion.
But it doesn't really matter anymore, because there's their action figures to remind me of them. And furthermore, I've got you and the engines. Every single one of you reminds me of those I fought alongside before the Combiner Wars broke out. When those initial conflicts began, I was so focused on getting a hold of the Enigma that the reason for joy was the last thing on my mind. That feeling returned when Tripticon began his rampage, and when I reluctantly joined Megatron, Moonblade, and Perceptor for their course against Megatronus. When I went into limbo after Hot Rod unintentionally killed me, the engines seemed to fear me. But you didn't, Edward. You knew what I was capable of. And much like Rootblade when Rustdust accidentally brought the rest of her team together to form me, You helped me relax my nerves, and to that end...
Victorion paused once again. Edward's sadness had finally vanished. He could finally tell how the female combiner was really feeling.
I just want to say, Edward, if you didn't bring me here, I likely would have been a forgotten memory. Thank you so much for doing so.
You're very welcome, Victorion, smiled Edward. Victorion couldn't have been more right. She and the Rust Renegades were happy. Happier than they'd ever been before. The engines were happy for Victorion too. Happy to have struck new friendships within the female combiner and her separate selves. As like them, they were machines. Machines who could be rebuilt no matter what state they were in. That being said, she still misses her old Cybertronian friends, and hopes one day she could tell them where she is now. Fortunately, she doesn't let those feelings get the best of her, as in the eyes of the Fat Controller and the engines, the Torchbearers, whether as their separate selves or merged up as Victorion, are all considered really useful Autobots.